Good evening, everyone. Welcome to Collinge for President / studentloanjustice.org live stream for Sunday, January 21st, 2024. I hope everybody is doing well out there in the world. I've got a very special guest with us here tonight, Christina Winton from outside of Phoenix, Arizona, I believe. Is that right, Christina?
That's right.
Well, welcome. Welcome one, welcome all. If you're new to the group, if you're new to our campaign, we are the oldest, largest, first, and really only true grassroots group in the country fighting only and absolutely for student loan justice. So there's a lot going on right now. I'm just going to give you the quick couple of bullet points just to bring you guys up to speed of what's going on in the world. This is breaking news. We just got word that Ron DeSantis is pulling out of the presidential race and endorsing Donald Trump. And think of that what you may. Ron DeSantis, to his great credit, actually included the return of bankruptcy protections to student loans in his presidential campaign. So in that regard, I'm kind of sorry that he's out. I think there was a huge number of Republicans and independents with student loans that were all keyed up to vote for him in the primaries. But now we'll never know. New Hampshire, he won't even show up in New Hampshire. So that's kind of a bummer for us, in my humble opinion. In student loan news, as if on cue, the Biden administration is rolling out yet another $5 billion student loan cancellation. It's going viral in the media, as it does every time they do this. The point that you need to be aware of there, people, is please don't be fooled by the propaganda. $10 billion in interest alone is added to the nation's federal student debt tab. So Joe Biden can cancel $5 billion every 3 months, and they're still making $25 billion in interest. And that's to say nothing about new loans. So, the Biden administration could be doing this forever, and the student loan portfolio would still grow by $1.7 trillion over 10 years. So those are kind of just the highlights. What's going on with you, Christina?
Well, I'm thinking as you're speaking, and one of the first things I say is that's really unfortunate that the one person that was the most vocal about restoring our bankruptcy rights dropped out. I'm not a fan of DeSantis at all. I'll admit that. But I'm even less of a fan of Trump for what he did not do for us when he had a chance and he was a president. So that is very bad news because I'm hoping that many that are going to be competing for the spot would be a little bit louder and prouder about restoring our bankruptcy rights. But my concern is that they'll take that as some kind of an odd sign that's not something to run with. They really should run with it.
Well, I agree. People don't realize, well, let's just look at the state of Florida, Ron DeSantis' state. $120 billion in student loan debt hanging around the necks of the people of Florida. That's, $8 billion a year in interest that is being taken from the state and sent to Washington, D.C. That's not something that any conservative should be endorsing. But, also many years of Pew Research data and other polling data show that among student loan borrowers, well more than half of them are Republican or independent. So of the 40 plus million people with student loans who are literally losing sleep at night because of their student loans, in other words, they were never going to be able to repay, somewhere between 50 and 70% of those people are either Republican or independent. So Ron DeSantis made a terrible calculation. Student loan borrower. Yeah, go ahead.
I'd like to interject a question there. Why should we be interested in sticking to any kind of party affiliation that doesn't support our people? It appears to me there's kind of a false class war starting here. People forget that student loans actually affect every segment of our population, and it exasperates already existing situations that people are in. Like if they're already homeless, it makes it even harder to get back into a home of some sort. If they're right there on the edge of losing their home, whether it's rent or ownership, they're living paycheck to paycheck. These student loans getting turned on and being forced to pay forcibly, and many people loyally paying for years. And something you brought up, Alan, in your statistics is frightening because you mentioned this new loan forgiveness that Biden's rolling out. I believe I've read in some of your work, and I've seen this for myself. It appears that these are largely borrowers that should have already had their loans canceled, forgiven, or paid off, more likely paid off years ago.
Yeah, that's exactly right. Joe Biden, he's pointing to these loan cancellation, but really all he's doing, he didn't cancel any loans by executive order. All
Right.
Biden is doing is pointing to these loans that even by long existing law should have been canceled years or even decades ago. And he's
Yep.
taking credit for it. And it's just the most um
It's misleading.
uncourageous, the most unimpressive stunt that you can imagine a politician play. Joe Biden is a consummate professional politician. He tries to steal credit for everything, and that's the game that's going on here. And
Yeah.
to your earlier point, Christina, a lot of people, I get emails sometimes, like I got a really vicious one earlier saying you need to pull out of the race because you being in the race hurts
Mm.
my candidate, and it was Biden in this particular case.
Oh, no.
Other people, I think the general consensus is, I don't want to throw my vote away on a third party candidate, on an independent candidate. And my
Mhm.
thought is, look at what the Democrats and what the Republicans have done certainly on the student loan issue over years and decades.
Yeah.
Isn't
They're
voting
not
for
doing anything.
one of those parties throwing your vote away?
It
What?
is. Alan, I've actually had people tell me, "Well, I'm thinking of not voting at all this year because there aren't any good candidates." And I said, "Well, vote for Alan Collinge then. Vote for Williamson. Vote for." There's another name that you mentioned the other day, and I'm not familiar with this person. What's that
Oh,
person's name?
well, there's the guy from Minnesota. I actually can't remember his name also.
Something Eaton, right? But,
No, I think there's an E in it. I don't know. It doesn't matter,
I
and
I
everything.
had another very important conversation with a friend of mine, right? And, they said, "Well, these are individuals that they don't how do we know they can properly run the country? They don't have experience." And I said, "Well, how have these experienced political, these career politicians, how have they been doing?"
Yeah, the way I answer that question is, if Donald Trump could figure it out, I can figure it out. If
Yeah, and
George Bush Jr. could figure it out, yeah, I think I could figure it out.
you the way
Um,
I put it is, "Hey, if I could get hired for a job that I didn't know anything about and I can learn on the job, then anybody can do this for president too." And maybe it's high time that we take people that represent who we are. We're hardworking people. We've struggled with this student loan debt. We've been defaulted borrowers. If we weren't defaulted borrowers, we've been paying for years and watching our balances go up, and it's affect when I say that this is creating a false class war, it means exactly this, Alan. It means there are children that come from parents that have never had an opportunity to go to school, and they took these loans, and they're in a worse situation than their predecessors now
yeah, that's
with
right.
these student loans, right? How good of a legacy is this really? And then people can start, wagging fingers at all of us and saying, well, you should have read the fine print. You should have read the contract. Great. What do you do when the contract changed on you without your own permission, without your knowledge, and without your consent?
Yeah. And it's even far worse than that, Christina, because nowhere in any student loan documentation will you ever see it explained that fundamental consumer protections that exist for all other loans, like bankruptcy, like statutes of limitations, like truth in lending laws, like fair debt collection practices, Absolutely nowhere is it explained to the borrowers or their families
Nope.
before they take out the loan that those consumer protections are gone. And you
Nowhere.
know,
And schools aren't telling people either, right? I mean, I'm still hearing from new students that they're telling me, "Wait a
no,
minute, our rights were gone?"
even
What?
today, the fact that those consumer protections are gone is not made known to the borrowers before they sign for the note. You know,
Yep.
that is in itself really enough to
Isn't that
constitute
fraud?
what's called an unconscionable contract.
Isn't that
Uh,
fraud too? I mean, I'm putting that in a question
well,
mark.
it's
We've
an
got
omission.
to
It is
offer it.
it is an omission which legally carries many of the same characteristics as fraud for litigation purposes. You know, if you fail to tell someone that you sold them a car that had no brakes, and you forgot to mention that there was the brakes were out on the car, that is a potentially criminal omission. So
It is, 'cause it can harm lives and everything, and I'm reading a comment here. That goes back to the class war statement. Actually, they're right. It's contributing to housing unaffordability. Um, there's very little middle class anymore. More money is going to the 1%,
yeah, you
right?
know what? I want to bring this up real quick. I don't know that I'm going to be able to bring up. I will try to bring up a graphic to prove this. But back to the class war thing. People all day long say that canceling student loans is a benefit for the wealthy. That these guys went to college and they're doing fantastically well, and so on and so forth. But the fact of the matter, ladies and gentlemen, is just completely different. The fact of the matter is that 100% of everyone who got certainly a federal student loan, they were determined to be financially needy as a condition for getting the loan. And if you look at PPP loans versus student loans, for example, you see that the overwhelming majority of PPP loans, over 70%, 75%, went to people earning over $100,000 a year, whereas 75% of student loan borrowers currently earn less than they're in the bottom four-fifths of the earning spectrum. So to claim that canceling student loans will benefit the wealthy is ridiculous. But also to claim that people haven't paid their loans, that is also absolutely ridiculous. But go ahead. I'm going to go ahead and bring up this little graphic just to show people what the actual numbers are with student loan, with who actually owns the student loans. You can see here.
Wow,
Yeah. So
that's
to claim
hard.
that canceling student loans is regressive is exactly wrong. But also the people have repaid their student loans. I would say most of the people the relatively small number of people who are seeing student loan cancellation today, they have probably paid on average far more than they originally borrowed.
Yep, Alan, is it, fair to estimate that of all of our student loan borrowers, I believe almost 65 per no, 50 to 65% of them are over the age of 35 now, and more of them are fast approaching 50, age 50. So it's more borrowers that are older than younger, and we're also
That's
looking
right.
at a situation here with these borrowers where, they've at least paid their loans off once before, and they're still owing the same amount or double or triple what they originally borrowed.
Yeah, that's exactly right. In fact, the overwhelming majority of the student loan portfolio today, it's profit. The taxpayers have been repaid for pretty much every nickel, if not every nickel, that they ever lent out. You can't say that about PPP loans. You can't say that about any government program anywhere ever. Like,
No.
why should the federal government be looking at student loans as a profit center? Particularly when the program was originally created in 1965, President LBJ, Lyndon Johnson, he declared upon signing that legislation that the loans would be free of interest. Those were his exact words, free of interest. And
Yep.
today, $100 billion a year in interest alone is clicking off on our backs. So one other very important point I didn't mention, Christina, but we discovered this a couple weeks ago. It's not being reported in the media, by the way. In fact, it's being blatantly misreported. Is that now that the loans are turned back on post-pandemic, 80% of all federal student loan borrowers are not making payments on their loans.
Oh,
So
wow.
people have paid, and I think the people have made up their minds during the COVID that, nope, I'm not doing this anymore. I can't do it. I won't do it. It's not going to happen.
I don't even think anybody can afford to, and from what I'm hearing, a lot of the lenders are starting to ask for amounts that aren't even reasonable. And again, changes in contracts have happened without borrower permissions. And isn't there a portion of that debt that you were telling me that right now Department of Education gave you some news that they've admitted that they're counting as payments, but they're not actually payments? What
Oh
part
yeah,
is that?
that's a good point. So I put the graphic of the non-payers up on. Maybe I'll share my screen with this with this as well. I put up a graphic on Twitter about the non-payers for student loans today, and Twitter blocked my graphic saying that it contained graphic material. And I don't know if
Out of
you can.
all of the horrible stuff that's been out on Twitter, including something that X's owner put up recently that I found.
Yeah,
They're saying your graphic isn't.
and by the way, here, ladies and gentlemen, is the graphic material. It is
Wow.
literally a freaking graph. Like, so
And that's not
I guess they weren't
acceptable?
wrong,
I'm sorry.
I guess Twitter
I'm
was
losing
actually
it,
right
Alan.
that it is indeed graphic material, but this is a graph, people. Like,
The
what's happening here?
unacceptable graphic material.
Yeah,
I'm
this
gonna
is
put that
definitely
in quotes.
graphic
Alan,
material,
that's
right?
hysterical. Oh my gosh.
So so if you look at this graph, you can see that fully. I can't read it because my eyes are terrible, but the red part is the people who just aren't paying. That orange part is people who are are
63.2% not paying, right? That's what I'm reading,
okay,
63.
yeah, whatever it says is what it is.
And then
The
15.1% is, a segment of that portion that you're talking about where they're not technically paying, but they're counted as paying at this time?
That's exactly right.
Okay.
That's what the New York Times and the Department of Education are. They are counting these people who are not making payments. They're making quote unquote $0 payments, and
Okay.
this is like 5.4 million people. So at the end of the day, it turns out that yeah, 82% of all student loan borrowers are not
Not
making
paying.
payments on their loans.
Yeah,
And
21.8% is paying. And Alan, can I ask you, do you feel that most of that 21.8% are people paying due to feeling like they're under some form of undue stress and duress?
I think that half of those people are paying and paying, but they still have increasing loan balances. So
Mhm.
yes, fully half of those people, they continue to pay, but their loan balance continues to go up.
And my
So
my concern here, Alan, I want to bring this up because it's a very important thing. I've been speaking with a lot of borrowers. There's a lot of work that I've been doing for us behind the scenes in the last 2 or 3 months, and I've been talking to a number of people. And one of the things I keep hearing is, I would love to be more supportive of the student loan debt cause. I am drowning in debt. I can't afford to pay these bills, these student loans, even before they were turned on. So now I can't afford to pay them at all. But, and I'm going to say this very gently, they have employers.
yep.
They're in employment situations where they are being, uh, they're in a hostile situation. They're in a hostile environment where their employer is basically telling them they have to pay or else.
Yeah,
What kind of life are we living?
yeah, that absolutely is going on. You know, all the coercions that go along with having student loans. It's exactly what the founding fathers didn't want to see when they called for uniform bankruptcy laws in the Constitution. You know, it's this sort of, and I would say even going back to Washington D.C. And maybe probably Harvard University and other colleges, you know, these social engineers, they are using this debt as a weapon against the citizens. people can get fired from public employment for having a defaulted student loan. I think a lot of, just the stigma associated that has been sort of designed baked into this cake, it pushes a lot of people away from actually fighting for themselves, actually fighting for campaigns like mine and groups like ours, studentloanjustice.org. It's just terrible. John Adams once said there are two ways to conquer a country. One is by the sword, the other is by debt. And ladies and gentlemen, I'm just here to tell you that the student loan example is precisely the sort of thing that the founders wanted to avoid when they called for uniform bankruptcy rights. And hell, the entire U.S. Revolution was, in many ways, it was a fight against debt. So John Adams, George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, many of the founders were being skewered under debt to the king. And many historians look at the Declaration of Independence, and they see that as a document as much about debt absolution as anything else. Many of the people, in fact, probably half or more than half of the people who settled this country were fleeing debt from the old world, from King George. So I would just tell people out there, offload all the shame and all the embarrassment and all that nonsense, because the bad guys, the people foisting this loan scam on us, and it is a scam, they want you cowering in the shadows. They want you walking through life with your tail in between your legs. They want you quiet. They want you paying them. That's how the best scams work. And I have to say, the student loan scam is
it's top. Isn't it top? This is probably the biggest
pièce de resistance of the people on Wall Street. The subprime home mortgage con was pretty good, but student loans have no bankruptcy rights. They have no statutes of limitations. They become lifelong bonds of indenture. I mean, you can't get a better loan scam than what we have seen in this country. So,
and the shame that they're throwing people. And Alan, with you running for president, and with anyone running for president, I would bring that out to everybody. Every single one of them should be realizing something, and I'm going to bring it up here. We're going to have to look at more issues with you running as president. But what a lot of people forget is that student loans is hitting every single dynamic. It's hitting every single issue. It's hitting homelessness. It's hitting the housing crisis. It's hitting the situation where we're seeing more drugs being used, more mental health issues, and more abuses, self-abuses in general, because people are starting to self-medicate in order to cope. And God forbid, unfortunately, we're starting to lose some lives because of these student loans. So a lot of these people that are out there listening to the propaganda, and they are finger wagging, and they're telling us, you know what, student loans are just an individual issue, and they made a poor choice. These young people took out these loans. Well, okay, so we were young when we took out the first loans, but many of us have taken out loans for our master's degree programs, our PhD programs, certifications to continue teaching and working in certain fields. You have to get continuing education credits, even trade schooling. Some people say, go to trade school, go to tech school. Okay, great. They're now required to take out student loans. So you don't have the borrower rights, you don't have the protections, you don't have any way of paying these loans back. They're in the same boat we are, even though they took a different route, right?
I tell everybody out there who likes to wag their finger at us, first of all, I ask them, I go, are you being paid by the colleges? Are you being paid by the Department of Education? And they go, no, I hate the colleges. I can't stand the federal government. The Department of Education needs to be closed. I go, well, why are you fighting for their loan scam? Like, why?
That's a valid question.
Are you fighting for the colleges? Why are you fighting for the federal government? Why don't you go be mad about PPP loans? PPP loans were actually very expensive for the taxpayer. They added to our national debt. They required money to be drawn from the Treasury to fund those suckers. Canceling student loans does none of those things. And to blame the borrower is really, it's a cheap psychological trick, because when people think of student loans, you just mentioned the word, they think kids, they think, I don't know, beer, like spring break,
Yeah,
and
lots of
blah, blah,
fun and
blah.
a couple of rich kids,
And
right?
when I was a kid, I worked this job. Yeah, when I was a kid, I worked 50, 60 hours a week in the summer, and I worked 20, 30 hours a week during college.
How many
Uh,
jobs did you have? I held 3 or 4 jobs while I was going through my undergraduate and then later for my master's,
oh, I held
and
all kinds of
supporting a
jobs.
family
I was
at the time.
waiting tables. I was working 2 full-time jobs up in Alaska over the summertime, literally. Oh, I could go on and on, but don't tell me about work ethic and pulling yourself up by
Right,
your bootstraps. This is not a bad borrower problem. This is a
right.
failed loan scam. That's what it is. You
Can
know,
we call it a poverty tax, Alan? 'Cause I've estimated it just based on my own student loans that I had before it was recently, and I'm gonna put this in quotes, air quotes, "forgiven," when it actually I should have had those loans paid off years ago
yeah.
without public service loan forgiveness. That's how much money I paid, right? So, would you estimate I estimated about 45% poverty tax. That's how much additional the majority of us are paying on our student loans on an average.
Yeah, I don't have, we have to wrap this up here tonight. We're over 20 minutes now, but um I would love to. It's maybe next week, if I remember. We'll go through some slides of people who borrowed $60,000, who have literally repaid like $250,000 on a $60,000 note, and they still owe like over $100,000. This is not a bad borrower problem. This is a predatory, viciously unconstitutional loan scam, and people are waking up to that, Christina. I mean, the repayment rates, the 80% not paying on their loans, that pretty much says it all. Student
That's
loans are
telling.
finished, ladies and gentlemen. And if you like my campaign, if you hate it, that fact remains. And I might also
Alan,
add, I'm gonna close out here in a minute, but maybe the
well, I
last.
do wanna say thank you,
Please,
Alan,
go ahead.
because, you're best positioned for all of us to be able to do this. I would love to join you on that journey and help you out in any way possible, and I hope a lot of people will, and if more of us have to run in the future, if we can't get this done before election time, then so be it, Alan. I'll be there to help you. Many of us will. Thank you for stepping up and helping out and doing this.
Well, thank you so much, Christine. And we'll have to do this more often. I like having guests on my live streams. It's far better than me being a talking head. And
Absolutely. You can
if
have
you,
me anytime. We can grab a couple of other people. I see a lot of great comments here. And
good, good, good.
if we have more people join and guest with you, that would be awesome.
Well, absolutely. And let me just say, I'm going to close out here in a minute. Just let people know Christina is in Arizona. If you happen to live in Arizona, Christina is our state chapter leader, and we certainly would love to have a huge. We've got hundreds of members already, but I'd love to see thousands. There's no reason we can't have tens of
I
thousands
need
of people.
I need help. Yep.
Yeah.
Anybody in Arizona, reach out to me.
And if you
I
go
can
to our website, studentloanjustice.org, you can very easily find our state chapters. So thank you, Christina, and we'll talk soon.
absolutely. Thank you for having me, Alan, and you have a great day. And thank you, everybody.
Okay. So there you have it, folks. Great thanks to Christina. Just in closing, ladies and gentlemen, I want you to know we actually can win this election. I'm not kidding you. There are 40 million people tonight losing sleep over their student loans. As I roll out my presidential agenda in going forward, it is a very balanced agenda. It will appeal to both Republicans and Democrats. I focus on economic issues, so taxing the wealthy, which is something that I think 99% of the people can get behind. And even some of the one percenters like Bill Gates and Warren Buffett and others agree that the wealthy need to be taxed much, 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 much more than they are today. Those are the sorts of issues I'm going to be talking about most. And so I think and I hope that no matter what your political stripes are, you will get behind our campaign. And I would also say, finally, whatever you think my chances actually are of winning this election, I think I can win, obviously. But whatever you think the chances are, please get behind this campaign nonetheless, because, as much as I am running for president, I am trying to finally solve the student loan problem. And only when we put the kind of pressure that this campaign is going to hopefully put on both parties, it's only that sort of pressure that's going to solve this problem. So ideally, we could have the student loan problem finally solved before November 7th of this year. It could happen, but it will only happen when you get out of the shadows and you stand up and you help us fight. So I hope something I said tonight resonates with you, gives you some hope. I hope that something Christina said may have jogged something in your mind and will get you off the couch. I do know that we need you. I do know that we are in this together, and I do know that we are the only thing going that I can tell that is fighting this battle in the way that it needs to be fought. So don't be ashamed. Don't be embarrassed. In fact, you have no idea how important you could be. We need you. So please tell everyone you know with student loans about this campaign, and let's make something of this, shall we? This is our shot. So let's take it. So good night. I'll see you next week. Good luck. God bless, and God bless America. See you next week.